Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with another knife for you. This is the Kiku Matsuda designed SOG Kiku. Very, very cool blade. And this is one of those blades that certainly stands out and one that you buy not because you're looking for a certain set of specs. If once we get to that, which we will in a second here, I think you'll understand that, you know, there are lots of knives with Aus-8 steel, 3.5 inches, 3.5 inch blades, that kind of stuff. Anyway, the specifics on this knife are that it's 7 3/4 inches open. The blade is 3.5 inches, and it's about 5/8 thick. That's, you know, I'm not going to get a more accurate measurement than that to tell you exactly, because 5/8 should give you a pretty good idea that it's just a little over 1/2 inch. The weight on this knife is 4.2 ounces, and the blade is called a Tanto recurve, but we'll talk about that a little bit more when we talk about more subjective features. It's Aus-8 steel and of course satin finish. This knife also comes in tie-dye coated blade, and it also comes in a much bigger size. There's a folder with 4.5 or 4 3/4 inch blade that's quite a bit larger. I wanted something I could reasonably carry in my pocket, and so that just wasn't gonna cut it. It was just way too big. Deployment on this knife is so smooth and so good that yeah, it just flies out when you want it to. It goes out very smoothly. The lockup is good, and very nice feel to deploying the knife. It is a liner lock, and see if I can show you how the lockup there. You can see it's fairly early lockup, and that'll change a little bit over time, but probably not too much. But don't foresee any issues with it. There were some comments that the lock bar is not thick enough, or the lockup isn't positive enough, but I've used it quite a bit, and I've never once had any kind of feeling that, oh, this knife would close on me or anything like that. Someone who does, I'm not sure what you're using your pocket knife for, where you're really worried that this lockup is going to fail. Most of the time, the way we use our knives, if there was no lockup at all, we'd be just fine. So that's the lockup. It's a liner lock. The lanyard hole is a little small, and to get this lanyard in, I had to strip out the innards of this paracord, and then it went through fine. You could probably fit a full-size piece of paracord through if you tied a string around it or something and pulled it through. And the clip is what SOG does always pretty well. It's a very low ride clip, and it is reversible to this side, but there's no tip down carry for this knife. Now, that gives you all the sort of specs. So again, 7 3/4 overall, 3.5 inch blade, 5/8 thick or so, 4.2 ounces, Tanto blade, Aus-8 steel, linen micarta handle. I don't think I mentioned that, but that sort of gives you the general specs on the knife. And now let's go on to talk about what makes this knife different, what makes this knife cool. Because let's be honest, if you're looking for a 3.5 inch blade in Aus-8 steel in a liner lock, there are like thousands of knives, right? There's all kinds of knives that would have similar characteristics to that. So what is it that makes this knife a little different? Why would you buy this instead of some of the other? And there are many similar blades. And one that comes to mind right away are the Ontario, the Rat or the Utilitac. Both of them are Aus-8 steel, and both of them are just a little bigger than this. So why wouldn't you buy that instead? Well, this knife's got some things going for it that I think are pretty cool, and maybe you will too. So let's talk about some of those things. The first one is the look and feel and shape of the knife. Okay, you can tell that this is not just something that a committee put together. This was designed by Kiku Matsuda. You can see that there's some intentionality, there's some flow, there's some artwork going on here. And that's one of the things that I look for in a knife. Now, I don't always carry a knife like that. Sometimes I carry a knife that's purely based on function. But sometimes you want something that's just kind of cool. I think Nut and Fancy calls it the second kind of cool, where there's There's just some other things going on that make the knife appealing. And, we could call that subjective kind of stuff. And I think it's in the subjective stuff that this knife really, really shines. The blade shape, for example. They call it a tanto blade, but look at all the stuff that's going on. You've got a recurve here. You've got hollow grind for the first couple of inches there. And then past this secondary point of the tanto, which barely is a point. I mean, there's a point there, but you can see that it's not as defined as most tanto blades. Then it becomes flat ground. You got the swedge up here. There's just a lot of really cool stuff going on with this blade design that makes it really, really something different. By the way, this is a great cutter. I've cut a number of different things with it, cardboard and paper and fruits and vegetables and all kinds of things. Cuts very, very well. Of course, it comes from the factory razor sharp. I've had to sharpen this once already. Because I carried it quite a bit. And why wouldn't I? Look at it. The thing is really, really cool. So the blade shape is pretty cool. Now the handle, again, has some things going on that are very, very different. Some of the things I like, look, there's no pillars in there. It's totally open, which is great for, if you're carrying it and it's going to be in your pocket getting lint out or anything like that. It also just makes it look different, makes it lighter. The handle scales are one of the big features that made me want this knife. They're micarta. Micarta handle scales on a folding knife is pretty rare in the primary market. Now, aftermarket, there's lots of guys making micarta scales for a number of different knives. That's one of the things that I plan to do to my paramilitary is put micarta scales on it just once I find the best place to get those. There's a few different options. But this knife comes with micarta scales. It's already done what I think needs to be done to lots of knives. I would love it if every knife had the option of micarta scales. They're just great. And of course, these are milled out. There's a little depression in the middle of the handle. You can sort of see there. That adds to the grippiness of it. And then there's the little cutouts all the way along, all the way around top and bottom. And that's more, of course, an aesthetic feature. It just adds to the look of the knife, which is, again, pretty cool. The scales make the knife a little thicker. As I said, it's about 5/8 of an inch thick. And this is pretty probably well known and standard, but a thicker handle does increase comfort. That's all there is to it. It just feels better in hand with a thicker handle. And it's not the end of the world in terms of pocket carry. Yeah, a thinner knife carries a little better, but the popularity of the Benchmade Griptilian, for example, kind of lets you know that obviously people are okay with a thicker handle. It's not the end of the world. It's not going to ruin a knife. Now, if you're really concerned about that, yeah, you need to know this is a bit of a heftier handle, but the knife itself is very light and it's not a real inconvenience to carry with you. The low carry clip. Now, SOG has that on a number of knives, and so this is not the only option with that, but it just adds that extra sort of feature to the knife. And finally, the designer. Kiku Matsuda makes awesome knives, and none of which I can afford. But this way, I can own a Kiku Matsuda knife and have that pride of ownership. And this is a knife that when I show to people, they're like, "Whoa, that thing is awesome!" And I think that myself, so it's no wonder. And part of the reason is because it's a designed knife. There's a person who thought about how this knife should look and feel, who did a bunch of sketches and tried a bunch of different things, and who has a lot of experience under his belt in terms of making knives. And I find myself more and more drawn to designed knives, whether it be, the Warren Osborne designed Benchmades. I just find pretty much all of them I like. Todd Jernigan Vast that I showed you before, the CRKT M16, or the Ken Onions that he's done a bunch of work for. They're great. Everyone's probably gonna hate this. I'm not really crazy about the Hinderer knives. They just seem too big and too heavy and too bulky. But I know people just love those Hinderer designed knives. I do have one. I have a Cryo 2. And I'll probably do a review of it, but I'm not totally crazy about it. It's a nice knife, good knife, but again, some of those Hinder designs, I'm not that into it. But this knife, the design is awesome. I mean, you could just put it on a wall and look at it. The thing is really, really cool. There are lots of 3.5-inch AUS-8 steel knives out there. But this one just does some things differently. The look, the feel, the weight, it gets a lot of things right. And very, very comfortable to use. I didn't buy it to sit on a shelf. I do carry it, I do use it, and it works very well. It just functions the way that I want it to. And so I've got to say I'm a big fan of this knife. Now, this is what I'm going to say. If you are just looking for a set of specs, you want a 3.5-inch blade, you want AUS-8 steel, or comparable steel to AUS-8, you want a liner lock knife with a low carry clip, there are a bunch of knives out there that would fit the bill. Okay, there are a bunch of knives out there that would cost a lot less than this. Well, maybe not a lot less, but considerably less, and do what you want them to do. And so I would say this is not a knife you buy because of a certain set of specifications. It's a knife you buy because you like the look of it. You like the feel of it. By feel, I don't mean how it feels in hand, but the feel, the overall impression that the knife gives. And that's certainly why I bought it, and I have not been disappointed. I a lot of times find myself wanting to carry this on days where I've got to carry something else. I do baby it just a little, but if I'm gonna, I'm carrying a knife because I want to tell you guys about it. If I'm carrying a knife because I need to do a particular task that day, I may leave this one at home. But a lot of times I go, man, I wish I could carry my Kiku, but I think I'm gonna leave it in the desk for this particular task. Anyway, that is the SOG Kiku. Really, really cool knife. Hopefully I've let you see it enough. The lighting is fairly good. I've moved around a little bit to try and get a good spot where the blade wasn't blinding the camera all the time, which is how I first started out. Anyway, I really like this knife, and if you like it too, then you won't be disappointed. Now, as I said, don't buy it just because you're looking for specs. This is not a knife to buy because of the specs, unless you just got to have a micarta handle, which, by the way, I think is awesome. That's one of the things I may change about some of my favorite knives in my collection. I may actually see about getting aftermarket micarta handles for them, especially after using this one. So that's the SOG Kiku. I think you'll like it. If you like the way it looks, if you like the way the impression that it gives, check it out. And if you're not buying it to carry all the time, check out the larger option. The larger one is pretty cool. It just wasn't practical for me because I can't carry it. And even the fixed blade. I'm not a big fan of fixed blades, but these fixed blade look so cool that I may end up with a second Kiku just to have the fixed blade version of this. So there you go. That's my thoughts on the SOG Kiku. Hope it was entertaining and interesting for you. We'll talk to you later.